Okay. All right. Okay. Welcome back to the second part of our discussion, everyone. The first part of our discussion, again, what we wanted to do was lay down the foundation as it relates to what the people of the New Covenant were called in the days of antiquity. And what we see, or what we saw rather, was that they were first, or was first mentioned as people practicing a theological belief which was just noted as a way or the way. And we see later, by the acknowledgement of Felix, after Paul was delivered up to be judged or having to give an account for his actions, that he was accused of being a ringleader of the Nazarenes. And then later we see that Luke states that Felix was associated, not associated, but familiar with this way or this practice, okay? Thereby binding the two, you have Nazarenes associated with the way, okay? Not Christianity, as we've gone in and have already established that Christianity was, or Christian was inserted after the translation of the book from the Greek into the Latin, okay? And it was a term that was first used by Bishop Ignatius of Antioch. All right. Let's go ahead and continue with the theology of the Nazarenes. Let's see what their practices were, and we can get an understanding of where we are today in our theological practices. All right, let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts chapter 21. Acts chapter 21, and let's pick it up at verse 17 through 24. Acts chapter 21, verses 17 through 24.
And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly.
Mm-hmm.
And the day following, Saul went in with us unto Jacob, and all the elders were present. And when we had saluted them, he declared particularly what things Elohim had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified Yah and said unto him, You see, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all jealous of the law.
Okay, here's your highlight in verse 20. Go back and read verse 20 again.
And when they heard it, they glorified Yah and said unto him, You see, brother,
how many thousands of Hebrews there are which believe. Believe in what?
Yahshua.
Believe in Yahshua. But notice, which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. The law is the foundation. The law is our culture. It defines who we are. It defines if we are lawful or if we are what? Lawless. Okay? All right. So look at the concern. Let's pick it up at verse 21.
And they are informed of you that you teach all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moshe, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs.
And this is not what Paul communicated to the Hebrews in these mixed assemblies throughout Asia Minor. What he communicated was that the Gentiles did not have to have circumcision imposed upon them. But we see that Yahshua's brother James says here, they are informed of you that you teach all the Hebrews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. So we have apostles and disciples with concerns about statements that Paul allegedly made. And we know that this is this concern stemmed from one of the epistles that he wrote to the Galatians, which was a mixed Hebrew assembly. And when he spoke to the Gentiles, he said to the Gentiles that circumcision profiteth nothing. And so when this word got back to the assembly at Jerusalem, there was a big issue with this, because it was communicated to the leaders in the assembly that here you have Paul out within Asia Minor teaching that the Hebrews does not have to be circumcised. Okay? So let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts 24. Acts 24. And let's pick it up at verses 14 through 15. Acts 24, 14 through 15.
But this I confess unto you, that after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the Elohim of my fathers.
Back up and read verse 14 again, okay? Here you have Saul being accused, okay, of being a heretic. A heretic. Go ahead and read.
But this I confess unto you, that after the way which they call heresy, so worship I the Elohim of my fathers, believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets.
Believing all things which are written in the law and in the prophets, and have hope toward Elohim, which they themselves also allow, that there shall be a resurrection of the dead, both of the just and the unjust. Let's go ahead and pick it up at Acts 27, 8 through 9. Saul is saying, I have not offended anything of the fathers. I've not offended the culture. I've not offended the culture. And we're going to continue to build upon these statements. Acts 27, and let's pick it up at verse 8 through 9.
And hardly passing it, came unto a place which is called the Fair Havens, near whereunto was the city of Lasea.
Mm-hmm.
Now when much time was spent, and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Saul admonished them.
Okay, so why do we have Luke communicating to Theophilus about a fast? A fast, Yom Kippur. There's a fast that we have one time in the year, the holiest day of the year. This is a day that you do absolutely no work, no manner of work, no pleasure, no nothing on. All right? Just a question. Why would you have Luke writing to Theophilus about a fast, saying that when the fast was passed, it says, because here you have now when much time was spent and when sailing was now dangerous, because the fast was now already past, Paul admonished them. Okay, go ahead and pick it up at Acts 28, 16 through 23. I just want to lay down a foundation of what the Nazarenes were engaged in. And then we're going to go back to our secular material and build upon the Christian perspective on the Nazarenes. Acts 28, 16 through 23. What we want to do is we want to be able to receive knowledge and understanding and skill to say to our friends, if we are not to observe the law, then explain to me why we have all of these activities taking place that's bound in the law amongst the apostles and the disciples. If we are not to partake in the covenant, if we are not to be practitioners of the covenant, then explain to me why you have these apostles engaged in all of these acts that are found in the Torah. Go ahead.
And when we came to Rome, the centurion delivered the prisoners to the captain of the guard.
Mm-hmm.
But Saul was suffered to dwell by himself with the soldier that kept him.
Mm-hmm.
And it came to pass that after 3 days, Saul called the chief of the Hebrews together.
Mm-hmm.
And when they were come together, he said unto them, Men and brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people or customs of our fathers,
Mm-hmm.
yet was I delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans.
Men and brethren, though I have committed nothing against the people or customs of our fathers, yet was I delivered prisoner from Jerusalem into the hands of the Romans. Go ahead.
Who, when they had examined me, would have let me go, because there was no cause of death in me.
Mm-hmm.
But when the Hebrews spoke against it, I was constrained to appeal unto Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
Not that I had aught to accuse my nation of. For this cause, therefore, have I called for you to see you and to speak with you, because that for the people of Israel I am bound with this chain.
Mm-hmm.
And they said unto him,
We neither received letters out of Judea concerning you, neither any of the brethren that came showed or spoke any harm of you. But we desire to hear of you what you think. For as concerning this sect, we know that everywhere it is spoken against. Go ahead.
And when they had appointed him a day, there came many to him in his lodging, to whom he expounded and testified the kingdom of Elohim, persuading them concerning Yahshua, both out of the law of Moshe and out of the prophets, from morning to evening.
Read 23 again.
And when they had appointed him a day, there came many to him into his lodging, to whom he expounded and testified the kingdom of Elohim, persuading them concerning Yahshua, both out of the law of Moshe and out of the prophets, from morning till evening.
Okay, all right, let's go ahead and pick it up at Romans 1, 29 through 32. Persuading them both out of the law of Moses and out of the prophets. Out of the law and the prophets. Now let's go over to Romans 1, 29 through 32. Romans 1, 29 through 32. And this is one of the reasons why our knowledge and our ecclesiastical learning and understanding, our education begins with the law and the prophets. The reason why you have Hebrew assemblies and you have Christians and various religious groups and bodies argue over the Messiah's name is because they do not defer to the law and the prophets in order to validate and substantiate their position. If you have in the prophets that the Messiah's name will be Yahshua, then where's the argument? Okay, go ahead and pick it up at Romans 1, 29 through 32.
Being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit, malignity, whisperers, backbiters, haters of Elohim, despiteful, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents,
without understanding, covenant breakers, without natural affection, implacable, unmerciful, who knowing the judgment of Elohim, that they which commit such things are worthy of death, not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. What he just named here, brothers and sisters, from 29 through 32 are transgressions of the law. How is it that you can have a religious body, a theological standing which states that we are not under law, but yet tells you that you need to honor your mother and father? You should not covet. You should not commit adultery. Are not these things found in the law? It makes absolutely no sense. Okay? But let's continue to build upon that. Romans 2, 10 through 14. Romans 2, 10 through 14. Let's look at what the ringleader of the Nazarene stated. The ringleader of the Nazarene.
But glory, honor, and peace to every man that works good, to the Hebrew first, and also to the Gentile. For there is no respect of persons with Elohim. For as many as have sinned without law shall also perish without law.
For as many as have sinned without law, that means that they don't even acknowledge the law, shall perish without law. And as many as have sinned in the law, they acknowledge the law, and they acknowledge that they shall be judged by the law. And as many as have sinned in the law shall be judged by the law. The law, okay, just does not deal with harsh judgments, but the law also deals with mercy. The law also speaks about grace and to grace, right, for those who commit lawlessness in ignorance. You hear terms and phrases that ignorance of the law is no excuse. It is an excuse for ignorance. All right, go ahead and read.
For not the hearers of the law are just before Elohim.
Not the hearers of the law. Paul is saying not the hearers of the law are just before Elohim, but what?
The doers of the law.
But those that do the law shall be justified. And we spend so much time arguing why we should not practice the law. Go ahead.
For when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves.
For when the Gentiles which have not the law do by nature the things contained in the law, these having not the law are a law unto themselves. The law, people, are broken into three blocks, three distinctive blocks. The first block, okay, as it relates to the law, are the laws pertaining to holiness. It shows you how to serve your deity, okay? It shows you what the Most High requires of you. In the first 4 blocks, first commandment is, you shall have no other God before me. The second commandment is, you shall make unto yourselves no graven image and bow yourselves down to it. The third commandment is, you shall not take or use the name of Yah, your Elohim, in vain. The fourth commandment, remember the Shabbat day to keep it holy. All of these laws deals with how you serve your Creator. And then you have the next block of laws that deals with how we treat one another. We're talking about social interaction, or the laws of morality, human relations. Honor thy mother and father. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not steal. Thou shalt not murder. Okay, thou shalt not commit adultery. All of those laws deals with human relations. And then we have our third tier, which are the ceremonial laws. These are the laws that deal with sacrificing. Now let's go back and look at 14. Read 14 again.
For when the Gentiles, which have not the law,
they did not receive the Sinaitic covenant. Go ahead.
Do by nature the things contained in the law.
How would they be able to do by nature, okay, of keeping the Sabbath day? That has to be taught, and it had to be taught. It had to be communicated. How would they do that by nature? How about not using the Most High's name in vain? Okay? We were taught the Most High's name. So how would they do that by nature? So it's not talking about the first tier of laws. It's talking about the second tier, the laws pertaining to human relations. If they do those by nature, they are a law unto themselves, which show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness, and their thoughts, the meanwhile accusing or else excusing one another. Okay? Let's go ahead and pick it up at 17 through 20. Pay very close attention. 17 through 20.
Behold, you are called a Hebrew and rest in the law, and make your boast of Elohim, and knowest his will and approve the things that are more excellent, being instructed out of the law. Okay,
go back and pick it up at verse 17 again.
Behold, you are called a Hebrew and rest in the law, and make your boast of Elohim.
Is he talking to the assembly in Rome? Is he talking to the assembly in Rome? Yes. He's talking to the New Covenant assembly in Rome. Look at what he says to the Hebrew. Behold, you are called a Jew, and rest in the law, and maketh your boast of Elohim, and knowest his will, and approve the things that are more excellent. How, Yishmael?
Being instructed out of the law.
Being instructed out of the law. We're looking at Nazarene theology. Go ahead.
And are confident that you yourself are a guide of the blind, a light of them which are in darkness, an instructor of the foolish, a teacher of babes, which have the form of knowledge and of the truth in the law.
Which have a form of knowledge and of the truth in the law, right? But he says, behold, you are a Jew. Did he not? Okay. Go ahead and pick it up at verse, let's go ahead and pick it up at verse 26. 26 through 29.
Therefore, if the uncircumcision keep the righteousness of the law, shall not its uncircumcision be counted for circumcision?
Go ahead.
And shall not uncircumcision, which is by nature, if it is fulfilling the law, judge you, who by the letter and circumcision do transgress the law?
Right.
For he is not a Jew, which is one outwardly.
Go ahead.
Neither is that circumcision, which is outward in the flesh.
Go ahead.
But he is a Jew, which is one inwardly, and circumcision is that of the heart, in the spirit, and not in the letter, whose praise is not of men, but of Elohim.
Go ahead and pick it up at 3, 1 through 2.
What advantage then has the Jew? Or what profit is there of circumcision?
Much in every way, mainly because that unto them were committed the oracles of Elohim. Romans chapter 7, 1 through 4. Romans chapter 7, 1 through 4. What I'm simply trying to illustrate here is that the Nazarenes, okay, did not deviate from the covenant. The Nazarenes did not deviate from the covenant. What they deviated from were the animal sacrifices. That is what they deviated from. Go ahead.
Know you not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law,
Mm-hmm.
how that the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives.
Not according to our friends. According to our friends, we are not under law. We are under grace. But here Saul says, first of all, know you not, brethren, for I speak to them that know the law, how that the law has dominion over a man as long as he lives. Go ahead.
For the woman which has a husband is bound by the law to her husband, so long as he lives.
Go ahead.
But if the husband be dead, she is loosed from the law of her husband.
That's right.
So then, if while her husband lives, she be married to another man, she shall be called an adulteress.
That's right.
But if her husband be dead, she is free from that law, so that she is no adulteress, though she be married to another man.
Go ahead.
Wherefore, my brethren,
you also are become dead to the law. By what law? By the sacrificial ordinances, the law pertaining to sacrifices. Wherefore, my brethren, you also are become dead to the law by the body of the anointed, that you should be married to another, even to him who is raised from the dead, that we should bring forth fruit unto Elohim. Let's continue. Pick it up at verses 13 through 25. 13 through 25.
Was then that which is good made death unto me? Elohim forbid. But sin that it might appear sin, working death in me, but that which is good. That sin by the commandment might become exceeding sinful. For we know that the law is spiritual, but I am carnal, sold under sin. For that which I do, I allow not. For what I would, that I do not, but what I hate, that I do. If then I do that which I would not, I consent unto the law that is good.
Go ahead.
Now then, it is no more I that do it, but sin that dwells in me. For I know that in me, that is, in my flesh, dwells no good thing. For to will is present with me, but how to perform that which is good, I find not.
Go ahead.
For the good that I would, I do not. But the evil which I would not, that I do. Now, if I do that I would not, it is no more that I do it, but sin that dwells in me. I find in the law that when I would do good, evil is present with me. For I delight in the law of Elohim after the inward man. But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing into captivity to the law of sin which is in my members. O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? I thank Elohim through Yahshua the Anointed, our Master. So then, with the mind I myself serve the law of Elohim.
Read that again.
I thank Elohim through Yahshua the Anointed, our Master.
So then, with my mind, this is the reason why Moses said, meditate upon the law. Solomon said, meditate upon the law. Okay? I thank Elohim through Yahshua the Anointed, our Master. So then, with my mind, I myself serve the law of Elohim, but with the flesh, the law of sin. Now pick it up 8 and 5.
For they that are after the flesh do mind the things of the flesh. But they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit.
Go ahead.
For to be carnally minded is death.
For to be carnally minded is death, right? You are already flesh, right? You're already fleshly, okay? But one needs not to be fleshly minded, but spiritually minded. Go ahead.
But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. Because the carnal mind is hatred against Elohim.
Go ahead.
For it is not subject to the law of Elohim.
For it is not subject to the law of Elohim, neither indeed can be. So then they that are in the flesh cannot please Elohim. Got a mic here.
All right. Right here, he's talking about animal sacrifice and also sexual lust, things like that, sexual vices and things like that.
Here?
Yeah, right here where he's saying them being controlled by the law of the flesh.
No. This is Flesh is used to denote carnality, period, right? We're talking about lust, greed, envy. We're talking about, hold on one second. Hold your thought. Let me show you. Let's go to the book of Galatians. Go ahead and pick it up at Galatians chapter 5 and pick it up at verse 16. Galatians chapter 5 and verse 16. Don't she?
This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh.
Walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. The lust of the flesh is everything carnal. The lust of the flesh is everything carnal, right? Walk in the Spirit is walking in the laws of Elohim. Why? Because the laws of Elohim are spiritual. Okay? Go ahead.
For the flesh lusts against the Spirit.
Uh-huh. Now, we just spoke a little bit about that over here in Romans, okay, the 7th chapter, right? He says, my mind, my focal point, okay, is going to be on the laws of Elohim, right? My flesh is my flesh, right? But, hey, if my mind is focused, okay, then the body should follow. Go ahead.
For the flesh lusts against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh.
That's right. Go ahead.
And these are contrary the one to the other, so that you cannot do the things that you would.
Right. Go ahead.
But if you be led of the Spirit,
if you be led of the Spirit, you are not under the law. In other words, if you are following the law after a righteous nature, right, then you don't need a reminder in order to be obedient to the code of ethics of the Most High. Okay, go ahead.
Now the works of the flesh are manifest, which are these:
adultery, fornication, uncleanliness, lasciviousness, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, variance, emulations, wrath, strife, seditions, heresies, envyings, murders, drunkenness, revelings, and such alike, of the which I tell you before, as I have also told you in times past, that they which do such things shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim. This is the lust of the flesh. Now go back to Romans chapter 8 and pick it up at verse 5. Romans chapter 8 and verse 5.
For they that are after the flesh,
we just named them over in the book of Galatians. Go ahead.
Do mind the things of the flesh.
That's right.
But they that are after the Spirit, the things of the Spirit.
Remember, he says, this I say then, walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. Right? Go ahead.
For to be carnally minded is death.
For to be fleshly minded is death. Go ahead.
But to be spiritually minded is life and peace.
But to be spiritually minded is life and peace. He says, this I say then, walk in the Spirit. Walk in the Spirit. Go ahead.
Because the carnal mind is hatred against Elohim.
Why? Because it is not subject to the law of Elohim. A Nazarene is going back to the point, okay, that you're going to have to focus and meditate and practice the law. You're going to have to do it, all right? And let me go ahead and jump here a little bit. Let's go ahead and pick it up at, no, I'm going to continue. And we're actually going to expound on this piece. But go ahead and continue to read verse 9, brother. Romans chapter 8 and verse 9.
But you are not in the flesh, but in the Spirit. If so be that the Spirit of Elohim dwells in you.
That's right.
Now, if any man have not the Spirit of the anointed, he is none of his.
Now, what do we have to have in us? Do we have to have the Spirit of Elohim in us or the Spirit of the anointed? The Spirit of Elohim, right? Which is his what? Word. Which is his word. Okay? All right, now let's go ahead and pick it up at chapter 9, verse 1 through 6. This is the reason why. Paul said in the book to the Philippians, he says, let this mind be in you that was also in Yahshua. Okay. Let's go ahead and pick it up at Romans 9, 1 through 6.
I say the truth in the anointing.
Remember, Paul told you, says, one is not, you all are looking at Jews from an outward perspective, right? One is going to have to be of the chosen people of Elohim according to the inward man. Not the outward man of circumcision, but the inward man of the circumcision of the heart, right? Okay, this is a Jew. Go ahead. Now watch what he says here in qualifying this more. Go ahead.
I say the truth in the anointed, I lie not.
Mm-hmm.
My conscience also bearing me witness in the Holy Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
that I have a great heaviness and continual sorrow in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
For I could wish that myself were cursed from the anointed, for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh,
Mm-hmm.
who are Israelites, to whom pertains the adoption, the glory, the covenants.
Who are Israelites, number one, to whom pertains the adoption. They were the only nation of people adopted from amongst man. This is the reason why he says over in the book of Amos, you only have I known amongst all of the nations upon the face of this earth. You only. Go ahead.
Who are Israelites, to whom pertains the adoption, the glory.
They give, right, they receive the glory because they are ministers of the covenant. Go ahead.
The covenants,
Mm-hmm.
and the giving of the law.
Not the receiving of the law. We received the law on Mount Sinai, right? But what does he say? The giving of the law. In other words, right, to teach the law. To teach the law. Go ahead.
And the service of Elohim.
And the promises. The service of Elohim and the promises. Whose are the fathers, and of whom, as concerning the flesh, the anointed came, who is over all. Elohim blessed forever. Not as though the word of Elohim has taken none effect, for they are not all Israel, which are of Israel. The objective is to become what? The Israel of Elohim, the Israel of God. Okay? And there's a process. This is the reason why Yah says, there shall be one law for all. As you do, so shall the stranger do that sojourns amongst you, right? Okay, when Yahshua returns, there will be a theocratic order, okay, upon the face of this earth. Everyone will be subjective to the laws of Elohim. All right, let's go ahead and pick it up at Romans 11, 13 through 18. Romans 11, 13 through 18.
For I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles.
Mm-hmm.
I magnify mine office.
Mm-hmm.
If by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them.
Go ahead.
For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead?
Go ahead.
For if the first fruit be holy,
That's Yahshua.
the lump is also holy.
That's the assembly.
And if the root be holy,
Those are the fathers,
so are the branches.
the children of Israel. Go ahead.
And if some of the branches be broken off,
That's right.
and you being a wild olive tree,
And you Gentiles being a wild olive tree. Go ahead.
were grafted in among them,
Were grafted in among them.
and,
You all were grafted in among them. You all were grafted in amongst the children of Israel. The children of Israel were not grafted in amongst you. You were grafted in amongst the children of Israel. Go ahead.
and you being a wild olive tree, and were grafted in among them, and with them.
And with them, so you sit at their dinner table, and you eat the food that has been prepared for them, that is being shared with you. Notice what he's saying to the assembly in Rome, and we're going to see what some early church fathers stated themselves. Go ahead.
Boast not against the branches.
Do not boast against the children of Israel. Go ahead.
But if you boast, you bear not the root.
You do not bear the covenant of the fathers, right? But the covenant bears you. Go ahead.
Though will you say then, the branches were broken off, that I might be grafted in?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because of unbelief, they were broken off, and you stand by faith.
Uh-huh.
Be not high-minded, but fear.
For if Elohim spared not the natural branches, take heed lest he also spare not you. This is a message to the Gentiles that are in the assembly in Rome. 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 10. We are going through these epistles that the apostles wrote, mainly Paul, to see if Paul communicated a Nazarene doctrine or what we know today to be, or what we call today a Christian doctrine. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 9 through 10.
Know you not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim?
What do we have that defines unrighteousness? What do we have that defines law? We have the Torah that defines unrighteousness, okay? You cannot teach doctrine from the New Testament. The New Testament is a confirmation, okay, of sound doctrine. Go ahead and pick it up verse 9 again.
Know you not that the unrighteous shall not inherit the kingdom of Elohim? Be not deceived, neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor abusers of themselves with mankind.
Go ahead.
Nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners shall inherit the kingdom of Elohim.
Everything that the law speaks against, everything that is against the will of the Most High, everything that is ungodly, unholy, everything that is profane, okay, is outlined in the Torah. What Saul is doing is he is extracting these things and he is communicating it now to the assembly at Corinth. Okay, 1 Corinthians 7, 5. 1 Corinthians 7, and go ahead, brother, and pick it up at verse 5.
Defraud you not one the other, except it be with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again, that Hasatan tempt you not for your incontinency. But I speak this by permission and not of commandment.
But I speak this by permission and not of commandment, because this, how would you say, this commandment or this act, this decision is not found in the law book. You're not going to find it written in the law that if you have an issue with your spouse, you separate for a while. That's not documented. So Saul has to preface this by saying, okay, look, this is what you do if you have some issues with your spouse. Separate for a while. Give yourself to fasting and prayer. But understand something. You're not going to find this written in the law book. But I am speaking this by permission. Go ahead and read.
For I would that all men were even as I myself. But every man has his proper gift of Elohim, one after this manner, and another after that. I say therefore to the unmarried and widows, it is good for them if they abide even as I. But if they cannot contain, let them marry. For it is better to marry than to burn. And unto the married I command, yet not I, but Yah. Now
he's telling you this is coming from the law book. He's telling you this is not coming from me. I'm not speaking this by permission. This is a commandment that comes from on high. Look at how a Nazarene works. That's the reason why when a question is asking me, if I cannot find it in the Scriptures, or if it's not to be found in the Scriptures and it's a pretty good question, I don't know, I would say it's my opinion. This is not doctrine. This is not scriptural. This is my opinion. This is my personal belief, because I do not have an answer for you. Okay? Go ahead and read.
And unto the married I command, yet not I, but Yah. Let not the wife depart from her husband, but and if she depart, let her remain unmarried.
That's right.
Or be reconciled to her husband. And let not the husband put away his wife.
Go ahead.
But to the rest speak I, not Yah. If any brother has a wife that believes not.
Okay, this is, Paul is telling you, this is what I'm saying. You ain't going to find this in the law either. Go ahead.
If any brother has a wife that believes not, and she be pleased to dwell with him, let him not put her away. And the woman which has a husband that believes not, and if he be pleased to dwell with her, let her not leave him. For the unbelieving husband is sanctified by the wife, and the unbelieving wife is sanctified by the husband. Else were your children unclean, but now are they holy. But if the unbelieving depart, let him depart. A brother or sister is not under bondage in such cases. But Elohim has called us to peace.
And this is exactly what Saul is communicating to the assemblies in order to establish peace. Peace. This is the reason why he's communicating outside of the law in order to address situations that the law, okay, did not deal with, that the law did not address. But he's telling you, I speak this by permission. Go ahead.
For what know you, O wife, whether you shall save your husband? Or how know you, O man, whether you shall save your wife? But as Elohim has distributed to every man, as the Master has called every one, so let him walk. And so ordain I in all assemblies.
Right.
Is any man called being circumcised? Let him not become uncircumcised. Is any man called in uncircumcision? Let him not be circumcised. Circumcision is nothing, and uncircumcision is nothing, but the keeping of the commandments of Elohim.
But the keeping of the commandments of Elohim. That's something. That's something. Let's look at the dialogue of a Nazarene and compare it to what has been taught over the past 2,000 years, 1,900 years, 1,900 years. Look at what's being taught and communicated, okay, by 68% of the world population today as they try to quote from this book. That's the reason why all of these doctrines that you find under the Christian umbrella makes absolutely no sense. And a lot of Hebrews that come out of Christian organizations, they carry residue from it, and therefore their doctrine doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's go ahead and pick it up at 1 Corinthians 7 and 39. We're going to go ahead and run this on down here because we have a lot of secular to go over. 1 Corinthians 7 and 39.
The wife is bound by the law as long as her husband lives.
But if her husband be dead, she is at liberty to be married to whom she will, only in the master. Okay? 1 Corinthians 14 and 34. Come she.
Let your women keep silence in the assemblies, for it is not permitted unto them to speak, but they are commanded to be under obedience, as also says the law.
Okay, now the law doesn't state that a woman cannot speak in the assembly, okay? But the law does state that they are to be under obedience. That's what's in the law, okay? All right, let's go ahead and pick it up at 1 Corinthians 16 and 8.
But I will tarry at Ephesus unto Pentecost.
Okay, so here we have Pentecost again. Let's go to Galatians. We went there. Let's go to 1 Timothy 1, 7 through 10. 1 Timothy 1, 7 through 10. Remember what Paul said. If you be led by the Spirit, then you're not under the law. What does he mean? 1 Timothy chapter 1, 7 through 10.
Desiring to be teachers of the law, understanding neither what they say, nor whereof they affirm.
Go ahead.
But we know that the law is good if a man use it lawfully.
Go ahead.
Knowing this, that the law is not made for a righteous man.
Why? Because a righteous man keeps the law by nature. He does the law by nature. Go ahead. Who is the law for, though?
But for the lawless and disobedient.
You can only disobey a policy, a process, a law, a guideline. Okay? Go ahead.
For the ungodly and for sinners.
What is sin?
Transgression of the law.
Transgression of the law. Go ahead.
For unholy and profane. For murders of fathers and murders of mothers. For manslayers. for whoremongers, for them that defile themselves with mankind,
Mm-hmm.
for men stealers, for liars, for perjured persons, and if there be any other thing that is contrary to sound doctrine.
Where is sound doctrine located?
In the Torah.
In the Torah. In the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. All right, let's go ahead and pick it up at 2 Timothy 3, 14 through 17. 2 Timothy 3, 14 through 17. Go ahead.
But continue you in the things which you have learned and have been assured of, knowing of whom you have learned them.
Uh-huh.
And that from a child you have known the Holy Scriptures.
Okay, the New Testament was canonized in the year 367 A.D. by Athanasius and his administration, okay? What's your time stamp on Saul's epistle to Timothy? Okay, it wasn't canonized in 66 A.D. Paul was writing letters in the year 66 A.D., okay? So when Saul tells Timothy, and that from a child you have known the Holy Scriptures, he wasn't talking from Matthew to Revelations. Matthew to Revelations did not exist, okay? And that from a child you have known the Holy Scriptures, which are what? Able to make you wise unto salvation through faith, which is in the anointed Yahshua. What do you find in the Holy Scriptures? What did he just enjoin? The law, the prophets, and the faith of Yahshua. Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
All Scripture is given by inspiration of Elohim and is profitable for doctrine.
Where do you receive doctrine from? Remember what he said, okay? In 1 Timothy chapter 1, 7 through 10, he says, and if there is anything contrary to sound doctrine, if there's anything that is contrary, right, to the law and the prophets, go ahead.
For reproof.
For reproof.
For correction.
Correction.
For instruction in righteousness.
Instruction in righteousness. Instruction in righteousness. All right. Let's go ahead and pick it up at 2 Timothy 4, 1 through 4.
I charge you therefore before Elohim and the Master Yahshua HaMashiach, who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. Teach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine. But after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables. Okay,
so let's see what truth is. Remember, they said they're going to turn away from sound doctrine, okay? He says here, they will not endure sound doctrine. Sound doctrine, we've already confirmed, are the law and the prophets, okay? He says they're not going to endure sound doctrine. They shall turn away their ears from the truth. Psalms 119 and 140 through 142. Psalms 119, 140 through 142.
Your word is very pure. Therefore, let your servant love it. I am small and despised, yet do not I forget your precepts. Your righteousness is an everlasting righteousness, and your law is the truth.
And they will what? They shall turn away their ears from the law. Go ahead and pick it up at verse 151.
You are near, O Yah, and all your commandments are true.
And they shall turn away their ears from the commandments, and shall be turned unto fables. Proverbs 30, 5 through 6. Proverbs 30, 5 through 6. This is Nazarene. These are Nazarene's teachings, okay? This is a Nazarene's epistle to another Nazarene. Make sense?
Okay.
Proverbs 30, 5 through 6.
Every word of Elohim is pure. He is a shield unto them that put their trust in him.
Mm-hmm.
Add you not unto his words, lest he reprove you.
Add not unto his words, lest he reprove you. Okay? All right. Go ahead and pick it up at John chapter 17, 16 through 17. Don't add unto his word. Don't add unto his word. You can elaborate upon his word by using other scriptures, by looking at trends and looking at statements that have already been given or communicated in order to expound on a verse. And that's what we do. All right. John 17, 16 through 17.
They are not of the world, even as I am not of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Sanctify them through your truth.
Go ahead.
Your word is truth.
Your word is truth. Your word is truth. Your word is truth. Every time Yah opened up his mouth, right, he gave what? Law. Okay, let's go to James 4, 1 through 4. James 4, 1 through 4. Go ahead.
From whence come wars and fightings among you?
Uh-huh.
Come they not hence, even of your lust,
Right.
that warn your members?
Mm-hmm.
You lust and have not.
Mm-hmm.
You kill and desire to have and cannot obtain.
Mm-hmm.
You fight in war, yet you have not, because you ask not.
Mm-hmm.
You ask and receive not, because you ask amiss, that you may consume it upon your lust.
Mm-hmm.
You adulterers and adulteresses.
Why does he call them adulterers and adulteresses? Why? Because they were committing adultery? Go ahead, Sister Elaine. Where's Walker?
It's talking about spiritual adultery.
Spiritual adultery, and we're going to confirm that. Go ahead.
Know you not that the friendship of the world...
That's spiritual adultery, okay? You are either a part of the world system, okay, or you're part of Yah's ecclesiastical system, okay? This is the reason why he says, you lust and you have not, you kill and desire to have and cannot obtain, you fight in war, yet you have not because you ask not, you ask and receive not because you ask amiss that you may consume it upon your lusts, right? We're talking about the pride of life. John talked about this in 1 John. You adulterers and adulteresses, right? Why would you call them adulterers and adulteresses? Follow up. Know you not that the friendship of the world is enmity with Elohim? Whosoever, therefore, will be a friend of the world is an enemy of Elohim. Let's look at what a Nazarene's doctrine is about and compare it to what has been taught for the past 1900 years. Many of your religious leaders, okay, running politics. Running politics. Part of the world government structure. All right. Let's go ahead and pick it up at James 5, 19 through 20.
Brethren, if any of you do err from the truth, and one convert him, let him know that he which converts the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins.
Brethren, what is truth again? Law. Brethren, if any of you err, right, from the commandments, and one, right, converts him or brings him back, let him know that he which converts the what? The sinner. He that converts the sinner from the error of his way shall save a soul from death and shall hide a multitude of sins, right? Okay, pick it up at 1 John 3 and 4. Truth. Brethren, if any of you do err from the commandments and one converts him, he says err from the truth. What is the truth? He just qualified in verse 20. He says, let him know that he which converts the sinner. What is a sinner? Pick it up at 1 John 3 and 4.
And every man that has this hope in him purifies himself, even as he is pure. Whosoever commits sin transgress also the law.
Whosoever commits sin transgresses the law. Let's pick it up 1 John 5, 1 through 3.
Whosoever believes that Yahshua is the anointed is born of Elohim,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone that loves him that begot loves him also that is begotten of him.
Mm-hmm.
By this we know that we love the children of Elohim.
Mm-hmm.
When we love Elohim and keep his commandments.
When we love Elohim and keep his commandments. This is a Nazarene talking. Go ahead.
For this is the love of Elohim.
What is the love of Elohim, Yishmaiah?
That we keep his commandments, and his commandments are not grievous.
And his commandments are not grievous. All right. Let's go ahead and pick it up at Revelations 12 and 17.
And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed.
Go ahead.
Which keep the commandments of Elohim.
Who did he go make war with?
With the remnant of her seed, which keep
who's the remnant of her seed? Who's the remnant of her seed?
Those which keep the commandments of Elohim.
Those that keep the commandments of Elohim. Go ahead.
And have the testimony.
And have the testimony of Yahshua. In order, remember what James said at the council, right? He says there are thousands of Jews out there which believe. The question was, believe in what? Believe in Yahshua, and they are all zealous for what? For the law. The very same thing you see quoted here in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 17. Let's go ahead and pick it up in Revelation 14, 12 through 13.
Here is the patience of the saints.
What is a saint or a righteous one?
There are those that keep the commandments of Elohim.
Those that keep the commandments of Elohim.
And have the faith of Yahshua.
And are purified in the name of Yahshua the Anointed, okay? Believing and confessing doesn't do anything, doesn't mean anything unless you are purified in his name. The only thing that you're doing is just talking, unless you are purified. All right. Revelations 20, 12. Did you all see? I mean, we went basically through all of these epistles. And in all of these epistles, right, what they're talking about is keeping of the commandments and keeping the law, observing the law, being purified by the law, being purged, right, by the law. Okay. Revelations 20, 12 through 15.
And I saw the dead, small and great, stand before Elohim.
Uh-huh.
And the books were opened.
What books were open? Go ahead.
And another book was opened, which is the book of life.
Mm-hmm.
And the dead were judged out of those
what
things.
What book do we have that have judgments found in them? The Torah, the law books. Go ahead.
And the dead were judged out of those things which were written in the books according to their works.
According to the works. In Galatians chapter 5, right, we talked about the works of the flesh. Romans chapter 2, we talked about the works of the flesh. In 1 Timothy chapter 1, right, Paul told you, that the law is not made for a righteous, right, but for the lawless, for the unholy, for the ungodly. And everything that you saw was a work of the flesh. Go ahead.
And they were judged every man according to their works.
Go ahead and pick it up at verse 13.
And the sea gave up the dead which were in it, and death and hell delivered up the dead which were in them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were judged every man according to their works.
Go ahead.
And death and hell were cast into the lake of fire.
This is the second death. And whosoever was not found written in the book of life was cast into the lake of fire. Revelations 22 and 9.
Then said he unto me, See you do it not, for I am your fellow servant, and of your brethren the prophets, and of them which keep the sayings of this book.
Worship Elohim, okay? This is the angel, right, that spoke to John and told John exactly what to say to the people, right? Okay? Go ahead and let's see what's in verse 14. Go ahead. That's what else the angel said. Go ahead.
Blessed are they that do his commandments.
But you hearing these words, though, right? You hearing these words. Go ahead.
Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city.
Blessed are they that do what?
His commandments.
Okay, that's all I want to see right there. Let's go ahead and pick it up our first bullet.
After the death of the apostles.
What happened? The question is, what happened? We clearly see from Matthew all the way to Revelation, the theme seems to be what? Keep the commandments, practice the law, right? Have faith in Yahshua, okay? So now we have a religion upon the face of this earth that just says just believe in Jesus and don't worry about the law, okay? What took place? What happened? Go ahead.
After the death of the apostles, the early Christians removed the Jews' influence from their midst and began the practice of Sunday worship.
Okay. The early church fathers removed, right, the Jews' influence. What was the Jews' influence? The law. And began Sunday worship. Go ahead.
Epistle of Ignatius to the Christian churches. For we are still practicing Judaism.
For if we are still practicing Judaism. This is what Ignatius said. To go and show you what he started off with. For if we are still practicing Judaism, we admit that we have not received God's favor. We should not be practicing our faith after the Jewish manner, to keep the Sabbath and to eat things prepared the day before. End quote. Go ahead.
Early in the 2nd century, the Nazarene Jews became subjected to a number of religious and political events. In 117 CE, the Roman Emperor Hadrian built a temple to Jupiter in Jerusalem and renamed the city Aelia Capitolina, turning Jerusalem into a Roman city.
Watch this.
Nazarene synagogues were destroyed and schools of pagan thought.
Read again.
Nazarene synagogues were destroyed and schools of pagan thought and Christian occults were erected in their places.
Go ahead. Go to the next.
After the Romans defeated the Jews around 132 CE.
Schools, Nazarene schools were destroyed, right? And schools of pagan thought and Christian occults were erected in their places. Go ahead.
After the Romans defeated the Jews around 132 CE, Yehuda the last recorded Nazarene, Nasi head of the Beit Din, was exiled with the rest of the Jews from Jerusalem. A Gentile Christian named Marcus was made bishop of Jerusalem in his place.
Okay. Kick the Jew out, we put in the Gentile, okay? So now he's responsible for teaching you sound doctrine. And what does he teach you? Lawlessness. Go ahead, next bullet.
In the 2nd century CE, many of the early church fathers or apostolic fathers began to make statements which further separated Gentiles from everything Jewish. Non-Jewish doctrines began to be developed, which became the foundational beliefs of Christianity.
Go ahead.
Although Gentile Christians were not particularly opposed to the Jews, and many still converted to Judaism.
And many converted to Nazarene theology. Go ahead.
The former position of the church was decisively set against the synagogue. The church sought to conquer the synagogue, which, in their view, continued to cling stubbornly to its ancestral faith. Frustrated and embittered, the church fathers set out to prove that Judaism was a legalistic, dead, and superseded religion.
Go ahead.
2, by reversing the biblical image of the Jews, the church claimed to be the new Israel.
The church claimed to be the new Israel. Go ahead.
Whereas the Jews were Esau and Cain, the murderers of their brother.
Go ahead.
Israel was portrayed as blind and divorced from God.
Go ahead.
This theology of replacement, which evolved in the theology of displacement, stated that the Jews had forfeited what God had given them, and now Christianity was the new heir to the promises and the blessings of God.
Go ahead.
The Jews, however, could keep the curses. In the Epistle of Barnabas, written around 135 CE, this replacement theology is clearly stated. Referring to the Mosaic covenant, Barnabas writes, "Indeed, it is ours."
It's ours. All this belongs to the Christians. Now, Paul just said in his epistle, he says, do not boast against the branches, for you don't bear the root bears you. Go ahead.
Indeed, it is ours, for Moshe had hardly received it when they forfeited forever the third epistle of Barnabas. Justin the Martyr 110 through 165.
And Dialogue 10 states, Christians live like all other Gentiles, not observing the festivals, Sabbath, new moon, or the rite of circumcision. Christ did away with the entire law of Moses and circumcision. True fasting is giving your food to the hungry. Okay? Church father rhetoric. Go ahead.
In 325 CE, a pagan Gentile named Constantine conquered Rome and made himself emperor. Constantine, although a pagan himself, declared his brand of Christianity to be the Catholic universal religion, thus making Christianity the enforced state religion of the Roman Empire. Constantine, who was an anti-Semite, called the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE to standardize Christianity. Nazarenes were excluded from the meeting.
Nazarenes are Nazarenes, right? This is a Yiddish term for Nazarene, right? Go ahead.
Jewish practices were banned. The day of the sun was substituted for the biblical Sabbath. For the first time, Gentile Christianity officially labeled the Nazarenes as apostates.
There you go. Go ahead.
From this time forward, Nazarenes began to be listed in the catalogs of apostate movements. The first of these to include the Nazarenes was Epiphanius, Paniron around 370 CE.
Next bullet, please.
The early Christian church was not a highly organized
This
body.
is an essay by Dr. Meredith Sprunger on an introduction to Christianity. An Introduction to Christianity by Dr. Meredith Sprunger. Go ahead.
The early Christian church was not a highly organized body with an established creed.
Right.
Therefore, it encompassed a wide variety of beliefs.
Go ahead.
The most famous heresy of the early church centered around a widespread and diverse group known as Gnostics.
Go ahead.
They believed that the spirit was good and that flesh was evil. Consequently, they denied that Christ could have been truly human. Jesus was not really born of the flesh, and there was no resurrection of the flesh. The Gnostics also regarded Jehovah as an inferior being, and rejected the Old Testament. Gnosticism was a syncretistic movement which incorporated beliefs of many Middle East religions and philosophies.
Go ahead.
Marcion, the son of the Bishop of Pontus, declared that the God of the Old Testament was a cruelly legalistic and merciless deity, and that Christians should discard the Old Testament and follow Paul in asceticism, celibacy, and scorn the physical world. According to Wallace Austin, a minister in Princeton, New Jersey, Marcion tried to get rid of the Hebrew Scriptures altogether.
Being convinced that the church was making a mistake in aligning itself with the religion and literature of the Jews. Dr. John Garr, a Messianic Jew, writes the following. In the middle of the 2nd century, the Hebrew foundations of Christian faith were attacked by the first great heresy that challenged the church. Some of the ideas of this heresy so permeated the church's corporate psyche that it has not yet fully recovered its spiritual and scriptural equilibrium. Marcion, son of a bishop of Senate and Pontius, joined the Syrian Gnostic Cerdo in Rome in developing a dualistic view of sacred history, which postulated the existence of two gods, the good and gracious God, which is Christ, and the demiurge, Jehovah of the Jews. Marcion taught an irreconcilable dualism between gospel and law, between Christianity and Judaism. The demiurge and his religion were seen as harsh, severe, and unmerciful, and they were cast into Hades by Christ, the good God. Marcion invented a new canon of Holy Scripture, which included only an abridged Gospel of Luke and 10 of Paul's epistles, some of which he edited. He wrested the words of Jesus in Matthew 5:17 to declare, I am not come to fulfill the law and the prophets, but to destroy them, right? So what Yahshua does is he takes Yah, throw him over in the lake of fire, and then says, I've come to destroy the law. This is what your Christian church fathers, attempted to publish. Go ahead, pick up your next bullet.
Dialogue of Justin, chapter 11. The law abrogated reads, but we do not trust through Moses or through the law, or though the law, for then we would do the same as yourselves. But now, for I have read that there shall be a final law and a covenant, the chiefest of all, which is now incumbent on all men to observe, as many as are seeking after the inheritance of God. For the law promulgated on Horeb is now old and belong to yourselves alone. But this is for all universally.
Right, Christianity. Go ahead.
Now law placed against law has abrogated that which is before it, and a covenant which comes after in like manner has put an end to the previous one, and an eternal and final law, namely Christ, has been given us, and the covenant is trustworthy.
After which there shall be no law, no commandment, no ordinance, born of curses.
Let those who are not yet acquainted with them, Nazarenes,
That's right.
please note how perverse their belief and doctrine are.
Go ahead.
First, they teach that we should obey the law of Moses according to the letter, the Sabbath, circumcision, and legal precepts still being enforced. Furthermore, to increase their error, they condemn and reject all the church fathers.
Furthermore, to increase their error, they condemn and reject all the church, to the Nazarenes. Very same things we'd be accused of, right? Okay. Furthermore, to increase their error, they condemn and reject all the church fathers and the whole Roman church, right? They condemn and they reject all of Christianity. All of Christianity, right? Now, let's see how they retaliated. Let's see how the Christians retaliated. Go ahead.
Retaliation of the church. John Chrysostom, possibly the early church's most powerful and influential orator, stated, the Jews have assassinated the Son of God.
Propaganda generally goes first, right? Okay, you want to wage war? Okay, go ahead.
The Jews have assassinated the Son of God. How dare you associate with this nation of assassins and hangmen? The Jews are the most worthless of all men. They are lecherous, greedy, rapacious. They are perfidious murderers of Christ. The Jews are the odious assassins of Christ, and for killing God, there is no expiation possible, no indulgence or pardon. Christians may never cease vengeance.
Christians may never cease vengeance, and the Jews must live in servitude forever. Elohim always hated the Jews. It is incumbent upon all Christians to hate the Jews. This is from Prager, D. and Toscan, J. Why the Jews, New York, Simon & Schuster, 1985. Next bullet.
The leader of First Crusade, Godefroy Bouillon, in 1096 CE swore to avenge the blood of Christ in Israel and to leave no single member of the Jewish race alive.
Go ahead.
When the Crusaders arrived in Israel, then called Palestina, they rounded up the Jews in Jerusalem, herded them into the synagogue, and burned the building to the ground.
Go ahead.
Marching triumphantly around the inferno, they sang a hymn, Christ, we adore you. Inside the burning synagogue, no doubt the Jews heard these strains of Christian worship as they perished.
Go ahead.
Fourth Lateran Council, held in 1215 CE, Pope Innocent III condemned the Jews to eternal slavery.
Jews were condemned to eternal. Now, how many of y'all know the Jews in slavery or went into slavery? Go ahead.
By decreeing, the Jews against whom the blood of Jesus Christ calls out, although they ought not to be killed, lest the Christian people forget the divine law. Yet as wanderers ought they remain upon the earth until their conscience be filled with shame.
Wanderers, no home, no place. Go ahead.
By the 11th century, the church had converted to Christianity virtually all the inhabitants of Europe. In 1215 AD, the church's Fourth Lateran Council set up the social destiny of the Jewish people in Christian lands for many centuries. At this council, the whole of Western Christianity may have well been represented. There were present 71 archbishops, 412 bishops, 800 abbots, and a host of other church dignitaries and priests. It was decided that Jews were forbidden to walk in public on Christian feast days and also had to wear a distinctive badge on their clothing. They were to wander over the earth without rights, without a home or security, and treated at all times as if they were beings of an inferior species.
Okay, and the so-called Jews today own the world, right? Own every single thing, okay? But look at what the nation's curse that they have pronounced against, right, the ecclesiastical Hebraic bodies, okay, and what Yah has placed as a curse upon them, right? And you're going to find their sink and sink. And just go in and just find where the Hebrews are. Go ahead.
The Council's Canon 68 states, Jews and Nazarenes of both sexes in every Christian province must be distinguished from the Christian by a difference of dress. Moreover, during the last 3 days before Easter, and especially on Good Friday, they shall not go forth in public at all. The negative projection of Jews continued for centuries.
That's right. Go ahead.
Even the Reformation did not improve the situation of the Jews.
That's right.
At the beginning, the great reformer...
We're talking about Protestantism, right? Okay, go ahead.
Martin Luther, expecting mass conversions of the Jews, wrote to the papacy condemning the Catholic Church's persecution of them.
Go ahead.
However, when the mass conversion of the Jews did not materialize, Luther felt betrayed, and his acceptance of the Jews would turn into loathing. Luther declared,
Now watch Luther's quote here. Go ahead.
Therefore know, my dear Christian, that next to the devil you have no more bitter, more poisonous, more vehement an enemy than a real Jew.
Go ahead.
Who earnestly desires to be a Jew.
Go ahead.
Now, what are we going to do with these rejected, condemned Jewish people? You must refuse to let them own houses among us. You must take away from them all their prayer books and Talmuds wherein such lying, cursing, and blasphemy is taught. You must prohibit their rabbis to teach. You shall not tolerate them, but expel them.
Go ahead.
Another form of isolation was the ghetto system introduced in Venice by the church in 1516.
Another form of isolation was what?
Was the ghetto system.
Go ahead.
Introduced in Venice by the church in 1516. The ghetto, from the Hebrew word get, meaning divorce, was a segregated and enclosed section of Venice for the complete isolation of the Jews from the Christians.
That's right.
Ghettos were prevalent mostly in northern Italy, the German-speaking countries, and a few Polish cities. The Jewish quarter, which already existed, was different to that of the ghetto, as Christians and Jews were able to mingle together. Christians also partook of Jewish life and learning. The creation of the ghetto was not just to keep the Jews in, but to keep the Christians out. With this statement, the church settled the destiny of the Jewish people for many centuries.
With this statement, the church settled the destiny of the Jewish people for many centuries. Church doctrine ultimately legitimized the torture and murder of Jews in Christendom for nearly 2,000 years. They were to live as wanderers on the earth, having no home, rights, or privileges. The Jews were treated as pariahs and became the scapegoats for all the ills of society. People everywhere in all classes were eager to exterminate the Jews. These people were not born with an instinctive, talking about the Christians, an instinctive hatred in their hearts towards the Hebrews. Their hatred was a product of clerical propaganda, church propaganda. That concludes our discussion today. There is a difference, people, between the sect of the Nazarenes and Christians, okay? We did an exhaustive, study on what the practice of the Nazarenes were in the days of antiquity and today, and what the practice of Christianity is today. And it is in direct opposition to what the Nazarenes taught and what they stood for, okay? And if it is in direct opposition, with what the Nazarenes taught and stood for, it is in direct opposition the will of the Most High. That concludes our discussion today.